the OT security in a lot of places is very lacking. And I just think one of the biggest things that's keeping it secure is that like countries would consider that to almost be like a kinetic act of warfare and like skipping past cyber to do something serious there. But I think like, yeah, in North America, we're very vulnerable to that. And it is a very big and growing and important area of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the IoT Security Podcast. Today I'm joined by Andrew Bellini, hardware hacker and content creator. In this episode, you'll learn about securing IoT as well as learning IoT hardware hacking, along with some resources and how to secure your IoT environment. I hope you enjoy this episode. Today I'm joined by Andrew Bellini. So Andrew and I know each other from the cybersecurity community, and we got to meet at the DEF CON IoT Village for the first time last year. And he recently reached out to me about being on the show. And Andrew is a great guest for this because some of the most successful episodes we've had have been people that are hardware hackers. So hardware hacking or hacking in general is always a popular topic. And so it's always great to get to chat with folks like that. So welcome to the show, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's really exciting to be here.
Yeah, good to have you on. So by the way, have you been to hardware.io yet? Because I got to go there back in, I guess it was in May in Santa Clara.
I have not been. It is number one on my list of conferences that I have not been to. So I'm over here in Canada right now. So all these conferences are a little bit of a travel for me, but I am very much hoping that next year I can go to it because I heard really good things from some friends that went this year.
It was a good conference. I kind of lucked out on that one because my manager about a week before the conference said, "Has anyone talked to you about going to this conference?" And I said, "No." And I said, "Can you go?" I said, "Sure," because it was actually one that I wanted to go to. I actually got to meet Asim, one of the founders and people that run Hardware IO at RSA this year. And so it was one of the ones I was kind of interested in going to. And so I got to attend. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was a 2-day conference. Even Joe Grand was teaching a workshop there. So it was pretty cool.
Yes, it's like all of the people that I look up to and a lot of my friends in the industry are always there. And it's like the highlights for them. It's like the DEF CON of the hardware hacking community and IoT hacking. So it's very high on my list, and I would love to take a training by Joe Grand as well.
It's interesting, though, the culture was a little bit different. I noticed there because you go to DEF CON and some of these other conferences, you have a lot of LobbyCon going on where people are just chatting outside of the conference rooms, not necessarily attending the talks. But there they had breaks in between sessions and people would kind of congregate then. But there wasn't much LobbyCon going on. I guess maybe part of that's due to the fact there's not always this opportunity to be around, that many talks around hardware hacking and hardware security.
Yeah, that and combined with like the training at hardware.io, from what I've heard and seen and talked to people, is world class. And a lot of those like trainers, they don't do anything other than live training, like Joe Grand, for example, very well known one, and some of the other ones. And with hardware, it is a little bit harder to do them remotely. So yeah, you have that opportunity to take those trainings. So I think a lot of people take advantage of that. So they're in the training a lot of time as well.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So it's one area that I know I need to get to know better, and I kind of gauge communities that I need to connect more with or get to know more people in it because I was there and I didn't know that many people. Matt Brown was there, so I got to chat with Matt. We've been connected through the virtual community, but never had met in person. So I actually got to meet Matt Brown there.
Yeah, Matt and I know each other as well. That's what I saw him on and watched the podcast with him, and that was what triggered me that, oh, hey, I should chat with Phil as well, because that was a cool podcast, and him and I have been on each other's streams, and I'm pretty active in his Discord community as well. And I've learned so much from his YouTube channel.
Yeah, very cool. That's one of the things, just one of the areas I really like to chat with folks that work in content creation too, because there's just, that's such a amazing resource for people to learn, because not everyone has the budget to spend to go to these conferences or pay for these trainings and to be able to have access to people like yourself. And actually, someone, I forget who it was exactly, paid you the compliment recently. I was talking to someone asking them about learning hardware hacking, good resources, and someone told me to get your training and buy the Adify hardware hacking kit.
Cool,
Was the
that's awesome.
recommendation I had.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned the house, like a lot. It's hard to, even myself included, without employee sponsorship or something like that, to go to some of these in-session hardware hacking trainings, because we're talking like, the lower end in the 2s to 3,000s to, you can get up into like double or 5 digits of the cost of them. So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to make a course, because there wasn't a lot of accessible options for people that are beginners and want to learn. And it's a really, really cool field of cybersecurity that is kind of like gate kept a little bit just by the cost.
Yeah, I can see that, because I will also see that cost could be a factor since there's not as many opportunities for these trainings in person. There doesn't seem to be as many people doing that either.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's not as many. It's kind of like a more niche thing. And then there was almost like the myth that I don't agree with at all, but that you need to spend a lot of money on gear to get in, especially if you're seeing like people doing it. The research that they're showing, they've got like, high-end microscopes and probes and oscilloscopes and, tens of thousands of dollars of gear. But I've always said, like, you can get into it for less, probably like $50. Honestly, I think you can get into hardware hacking and IoT hacking for $50 and build out a decent toolkit.
Yeah, that's very cool, because I got to attend some SANS. It wasn't actually a SANS course. It was one of the ones where they had someone else come in. Justin Searle, I think, built the course. Don, known as Cutaway, he was, that does some ICS stuff. I got to attend that session at the SANS ICS back in 2020. And it was kind of interesting. They got a lot of the hardware hacking things. It was an ICS pen testing course, but got into some of the wireless hacking and some of the embedded related stuff. So that really kind of got me interested. And I know at the time, as far as affordable stuff, the only thing I could really find out there back then was Pentester Academy had some things that could be used that were kind of related to hardware hacking. So you could do like dumping firmware and some things like that, or emulate firmware dumping and so forth.
Yes, yeah. There was, when I was learning, there was very limited. So was one of the motivations, and it was cool. I'm at TCM Security now as a content creator as well. So I do content, and they have a lot of affordable training there, which is awesome. And that was kind of the motivation for me to reach out to them. They were like looking for an IoT course, and I was like, you know what? I think I could make one, and it would be really cool if there was one that was like, in the double digits price, like, not more than that.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing about your course, kind of, is this like an entry level course, so you could just go into the details? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so it's called The Beginner's Guide to IoT and Hardware Hacking, and it does assume like some cybersecurity and technical knowledge of like Linux and basic commands, but other than that, yeah, it's like a zero knowledge of like IoT, electrical engineering, hardware required, and it builds up from there to like, a somewhat intermediate level. So I always say it's a beginner IoT and hardware hacking course, but I wouldn't consider it like a beginner course to like technology or IT or cybersecurity, because it is a little bit more of a advanced niche subsection of the course, or of cybersecurity.
Yes, kind of looking at your background, it's you have the perfect profile for this type of stuff, because it's interesting that you see in the cybersecurity community and back in IT at one time, folks that were in those areas they had like electrical engineering degrees. There really weren't anything out of software development degrees. There really weren't IT specific degrees, and a lot of people were coming from electrical engineering backgrounds, but you're not seeing as much of that anymore. But it looks like the perfect fit for hardware hacking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my background, yes, for those that don't know, I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I have worked in like the ICS, OT, SCADA as well. not in security, just like, as an engineer, maintaining and working and supporting those systems. And I also have worked in industrial IoT with trains, actually. And again, not specifically security related. I mean, of course, there's some security stuff when you're designing and training on and maintaining these products. But yeah, that's my background and where I learned the most about hardware and hardware hacking and embedded devices, and mostly just through how to build them and learning what developers do and what shortcuts people take and the debugging tools that are used. I mean, that's like 90% of hacking right there, is just learning what developers do and what shortcuts they take and what tools they use.
So what other advice would you give to someone who wants to learn hardware hacking along with taking your course?
Go out and get a cheap device. Either buy it, or I mean, I always say like the beg borrow part of beg borrow steal, like dumpster diving, whatever electronics waste, go to Goodwill, take it apart and go at it. Like, figure out what the ports do. Can I get the firmware off of it? What does the device do? What sections of the PCB do this part? Yeah, I have a personal rule that I always suggest people, like, I don't hardware hack on anything I don't want to brick, because I'll eventually probably brick the devices. It happens to the best of us. But yeah, so get something cheap and just go at it. Find a guide if you can. There's lots of write-ups on YouTube, or like my course walks through using like an off-the-shelf router. It's the most popular router on Amazon. So if you want like a really, really detailed one, you can take my course. But yeah, there's lots of good write-ups nowadays, and you can just go for it. Don't be intimidated. Spend like $30 or $40 on some gear and do it.
So how hard is that for someone to pick up compared to some of the more common methods of hacking, like web app or network?
It depends on what level of hardware hacking you're going to get into. So the like easier end of interfacing with like the debugging ports and being able to read firmware off of a device, I would say it's actually not that complicated. It's mostly just understanding how the tools work and the different protocols and being able to identify them. Then the other sides of hardware hacking kind of like crossover threshold, where you're looking at things like fault injection and glitching and side channel analysis. Those are like some of the most complex areas of cybersecurity, in my opinion, because you're needing to understand like complex mathematical functions, as well as like how very small embedded devices work and the circuit boards, and developing usually novel attacks on those. So that side is very complex. But the stuff that will get you most of like what I see in commercial devices is very easy to do. Like, yeah, I think anyone listening to this or watching this video could figure out how to do it and get into these devices.
It's kind of interesting, talking about, the hardware realm. One of the things I've seen from some security researchers here locally and just stuff I've seen on the internet is how some cases they're like web-based vulnerabilities, because these devices are running like the BusyBox lightweight web server.
Yes.
And it's not always as secure, and sometimes that's a foothold in.
100%. Yeah. And usually, so this is an interesting thing you bring up, because this is a good distinction that I have with like my students and people who are getting in is, like I'll show them how to use the tools and get a shell into, router, smart camera, whatever it is, through the hardware. But the vendor probably won't care about that. Now, if you're doing like a pen test, yeah, it's probably like a medium to even like somewhere in the high finding that they have these unsecured debug ports, whether it's UART or JTAG or whatever. But if you were to go and report that to the vendor as like a bug bounty, if they're a bug bounty, or like, responsible disclosure, they're not going to care. So, but what we can do is we use that access through the hardware, whether it's, to get a shell or dump the firmware, to understand better how the device works and reverse engineer it, and find vulnerabilities then that could be found through the web portal or mobile app or cloud that would be very hard to find if we didn't have that internal access to a live shell in the system and the firmware to reverse engineer, and it makes it a lot easier to do.
So you kind of mentioned bug bounty. So are there a lot of opportunities for bug bounty in the hardware space?
It's growing, but no, not it's not like it is limited, and like bug bounty is not really something I do because I don't have a lot of time, and like you do need to pour time into it, and I would prefer to just spend my time on the devices I'm interested in, and like it's not, yeah. So when people ask me about bug bounty, I always say like if it's a device you want to test on, and that's going to be an interesting use of your time, you're going to learn something from it, then go for it. But like if you're just starting out, I wouldn't be financially incentivized for which devices you're going to go for. I would pick the ones that you think you're going to learn something from or that interest you instead, personally.
Yeah, that's one of the things because my background is in offensive security. And one of the things I had a hard time with doing bug bounty was I could do side pen testing and I get paid for sure, or I could do
Yeah.
bug bounty, spend a lot of time and not make any money. So that was one of the reasons
Yeah.
I really never got into bug bounty.
100%. So yeah, you need to get something else out of it, and then if you find something, then the money's a bonus. But like you want it to work on whatever that kind of device is anyway. And I would say too, when you're getting started out, the devices that are in bug bounty programs for like IoT and hardware are going to be a lot more hardened. Whereas if you're starting out with like the consumer devices that are not going to have bug bounty programs, they're not hardened at all. So like I always say this, anyone can hack an IoT device. I could teach probably anyone how to do it, or at least like if you're hearing me say this, like you're interested enough that you're listening to this podcast or like YouTube recommended it to you, then you probably have enough knowledge that I could teach you how to hack an IoT device. And I've taught a lot of people, and they've gone out, and I'm not big on like going and finding CVs on these devices because it can be a bit of a runaround sometimes to even try and get the vendors to respond back to you. But I've had many people that have taken my course or attended talks or like just my blogs and stuff, and gone out and found CVs and gone through the whole process to report them and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting the difficulty that researchers can run into sometimes because I don't know, you've probably saw the case several years ago where the researchers found the bugs. I'm not even going to mention the drone manufacturer, but there's a drone that they found these bugs in. They had a responsible disclosure program. They found these bugs, and the manufacturer was threatening to sue them.
Yeah. Yeah, nowadays you don't hear that as much. It definitely was. It still is a thing. It's not like I saw a cybersecurity researcher that I'm connected with, and he was working on like stoplights that he found, which like seems like you would want these secure because these are like out in the public, right? Like not theoretical. And yeah, the same thing. They sent him a cease and desist, and like we're gonna sue you for it. And nowadays it's a lot better. So usually either they'll fix it and release it in a reasonable time if it's somewhat reputable vendor, but then the other ones, like you won't hear from them. That'll be it, because unfortunately right now in a lot of the IoT devices, it's what I say is like a race to the bottom almost, because what's driving the consumers for them is I'm going to go out and buy like a reputable device that like I'm buying it for brand name, or B, like I just need a smart camera for my house, and I went on Amazon or AliExpress, and this one's $15, this one's $20. Oh, this one is 2-pack for $20. Probably going to get that one, right? Without a lot of thought into the security implications for them as a consumer, like I think like the broader consumer. And yeah, so with those devices that are like companies racing to get it as cheap as possible, there's no money for R&D or security or anything like that. And the like web of like who's selling the product and like the name on it back to like who's actually making it. And if you open a lot of these devices up, you'll start seeing like the same or similar devices on the inside for like the electronic components, but then just different cases. So sometimes it's really even hard to be like, who do I even tell about this vulnerability in this smart camera I found? Because like this company that's selling it, like they're not designing it, they have no link back. So yeah. Yes,
that's pretty interesting. So what advice would you give people to secure their IoT environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple things. One of them is definitely segregating networks and having it so that you have them segregated, and whether using a VLAN or whatever. The second one is like I I personally, I don't use many IoT devices, but the ones that I use, like actually in my home, I like to buy from reputable vendors. So like, Amazon's a good one, like Google devices, because they actually have hardened hardened hardware, and they have good responsible disclosure or bug bounty programs, and they're actually concerned about their brand reputation and security. So those ones are usually much better. I would never buy like the discount or the cheapest ones you can get off Amazon and connect them to my home network. I do have like dozens to maybe 100 of them in my lab, but they'll only ever connect to my lab network, and I like taking them apart and looking at them. But if you want to do IoT hacking, those are the ones that I suggest to go out, and the ones that I say anyone can hack. Like, go and find the cheapest smart camera on Amazon and buy it. And like, I got one last year, and I did a short series on it on YouTube that ended up people found it very interesting, ended up being quite popular. And I literally just went on Amazon, sorted by cheapest to most expensive, bought the cheapest one, and then pulled it apart. And like, yeah, the security was very lacking on it. Not to be surprised.
So before we started, you mentioned something about you used to work for the MTA, and so with critical infrastructure being kind of a risk, are there any things that you're seeing out there that people need to watch for?
Yeah, so I worked for a company that contracted with them, so I would go frequently to New York or like other subway as well, and we provided a industrial IoT solution to train companies. That's a tough one for like individuals, because really it's outside of most individuals' control of what's happening there, other than like lobbying the government, or it's mostly probably going to have to be a government thing. But I would say for the most part, like not just strictly talking like MTA or like any signaling anyone out, but from what I've seen, I've also been to like power plants, oil and gas, military. Like the OT security in a lot of places is very lacking. And I just think one of the biggest things that's keeping it secure is that like countries would consider that to almost be like a kinetic act of warfare, and like skipping past cyber to do something serious there. But I think like, yeah, in North America, we're very vulnerable to that. And it is a very big and growing and important area of cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because one of the things that I keep thinking about anytime I hear something along these lines was the water treatment facility in Florida that was like a couple of years ago that got attacked, somewhere they poisoned the water treatment facility or did something to it.
Yep, and it was that one was through, I believe, an open team viewer to the internet, which I know a lot of people were surprised when they heard that, but I used to do a lot of support for these companies remote and in person. And yeah, we would be coming in through unattended team viewer access, PC Anywhere, like all of those. It's very common because you have a lot of vendors working and it's hard for them to come out. So there's a lot of different remote connection technologies. And a lot of times it'll be like the operators of the facility who are maybe like have like mechanical backgrounds or like fixing machinery that end up being the ones that have to like help out with this or set it up. Like I many times walked people through that who are not super computer savvy, and that's okay. Like their job was to like, keep the boilers on or whatever. But yeah, when I heard that, I was not surprised at all. I've seen that so many times places.
Yeah, some of the risks sometimes where people try to make it easier to access those environments when they're supposed to be air gapped, that maybe they put in a Wi-Fi router or run an Ethernet connection directly in there to bypass it to be able to more easily manage it.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I used to work with this one place, and like their PLCs and stuff would like always keep going offline, and their sensors and things, and they would call us in, and I would like remote in to like the computer, and I'd be like, yeah, like it's a network issue, like I can't troubleshoot it unless I come there, but like it's not our gear. And that kept happening for weeks. And then I was talking to the one IT person there, and they're like, yeah, we figured out what was happening, we fixed it. And I was like, what? And they're like, someone kept unplugging the Ethernet cable from the one switch that goes to all the PLCs to like plug their laptop in. I was like, what? Yeah. And then they wouldn't plug it in or whatever afterwards, and it would take down like the factory though.
Yeah, it makes me think of a story because I had Leslie Carhart on my podcast, The Phillip Wylie Show.
Yes.
And she shares a story where she's investigating this case where it's a power generation facility, and the failover power was getting turned on, and they thought it was this nation state attack. And what it boiled down to is they had a touch screen monitor, and at night it was dark and moths or some kind of insects were flying into the screen, and they just happened to hit the right button or combination of buttons to power on the failover power, and that's what it was. It wasn't
that's so funny.
It wasn't a nation state, but that goes back to basic hygiene. If they would have locked the screen, that would have happened.
Yeah, you never think of that. Yeah, it was a real bug.
Yeah, it was a real bug.
That's a good one.
That story is pretty amazing, because what are the odds of something hitting the touch screen to get something like that to happen?
Yeah, and then turning it off, and thinking it's a nation state, and it's way less advanced than that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a sigh of relief from the people there when they realized they were not being attacked.
No,
just got a bug problem.
Yeah, just need to
lock the console and put up some bug zappers.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. A can of Raid will solve their problems.
What are some other resources that you follow as far as IoT and ICS resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best one, in my opinion, that I push out, and I know he's been on your show, is Matt Brown's content. I've learned so much from his YouTube videos. Like, if you want to try and hack something, honestly, he probably has a video of like it or something similar, because he has so many videos, and he does them like long form, just like he doesn't skip steps. You're just watching him do it. And then he also has a Discord channel, or a Discord server, which is an amazing community. I'm a moderator there, and I started a project there where we call it the Security Research Team, and we do group hardware and IoT hacking projects. So we'll vote on like an inexpensive IoT device that is very easy for everyone to buy, because we have people from all over the world, and we treat it like it's going to be a pen test. So we all work together. We have some place where we share notes, and I've learned so much from that, because there are seriously talented people in that server, like way more talented than me, that do this like senior level, full-time IoT and hardware pen testing, and they just hop on and they teach people. And the one that's being worked on right now, I don't have my lab, so I'm not doing this one, but someone else is leading it, and they're going to write up a professional report at the end too, so that like people get experience with like the whole end to end of writing up the report. And then if we find stuff that's reportable, we let the companies know, do a vulnerable disclosure. But that is probably one of the best ones. The other thing that I always suggest for people as a resource is go out and learn how to build an IoT device. And it sounds a lot harder than it is, but I use like development platforms like the Beagle boards or Raspberry Pis are really good. And there is a book called Mastering Embedded Linux that I have read front to cover probably like 5 or 6 times, and it walks through the whole end-to-end process of everything from bootloader, kernel, compiling your own kernel, developing a tool chain, everything to build out like your own embedded Linux IoT device. And doing that, I learned the most about IoT hacking embedded Linux, because once you understand how the developers are doing it, and like at that level of building it, it makes it so much easier to reverse engineer and hack. So I recommend that book to everyone as well. Mastering Embedded Linux. Very good book.
So since this episode will go out right before Black Hat and DEF CON, are there any recommendations you would make for anyone that's attending Black Hat and DEF CON? Are there any villages that you'd recommend, or any kind of resources that they should check out while they're there?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they want to learn IoT hacking, there's 3 core villages that I would suggest. So of course you do have the IoT village, which I was there last year and gave a talk at it and hung out there, and there was a lot of really cool stuff there. There is the Rapid7 booth, and what their project looks like is going to be very interesting this year. So I would 100% go and see them and the rest of the folks in the IoT village and their talks. Then you've of course got the Embedded Systems Village, which is also very good and right up there with like hardware hacking, a little bit more hardware focused. And I know Matt Brown's going to be at that one. And then of course you've got the Hardware Hacking Village, which is a busy one, because that one's got the soldering stations, and you can like build your own little badges and things like that. So those 3 are excellent ones to check out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. One of the cool ones, if you ever get a chance to check out, as far as Black Hats, if you ever get the chance to go to Black Hat Middle East and Africa, they've got the most hacking villages I've seen of anywhere. They've got like a medical device hacking village, drone hacking village, IoT hacking, I believe like ICS. I mean, it's just amazing all the stuff they got there. And just the CTF alone is like the length of 2 football fields. There are like cool. 1,000 people on site participating in the CTF, which is a lot different than Black Hat USA. They just barely got some little small village in there last year. They're trying to get more of that in there, but I mean, this conference even had more stuff going on than what DEF CON usually does. So it's pretty amazing. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Are there any ways people can reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you if people want to contact you, and how can we find your
yeah, absolutely. So you can get to all my stuff. It's just at links.digitalandrew.io. So you can get links to my course, the certificate at TCM, what I'm doing. If you want a crash course free on IoT hacking, there's a link there to my DEF CON talk from last year at the IoT Village. Anyone can hack IoT, and I would suggest watching that. So yeah, and then I'm most active on LinkedIn if people want to send me a message or anything.
Well, thanks for joining today and sharing all this valuable information, and thank you for what all you do for the community. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks everyone for viewing. And if you want to learn more about Phosphorus, go to phosphorus.io. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, like and share it and subscribe with your friends and colleagues. Thanks for viewing.